I'm really glad I could join everyone today. I'm Norma Smith. I represent the 10th District along with my colleagues, my seatmate, Dave Hayes, and then certainly Senator Barbara Bailey. And I serve as the ranking member on technology and economic development. We do a lot of energy issues there as well. In addition, assistant ranking on capital budget. And so part of the negotiating team on the capital budget that came out last year with overwhelming bipartisan support, and do a lot of work actually on natural resource issues there. Well, agriculture and the future are the same. I believe that as we look forward into the future, how we are going to steward our lands, the public policy decisions, agriculture is truly the canary in the coal mine. If we don't protect agriculture in Western Washington, that's where it's most at risk, then we risk our very way of life. We risk the ability to help another generation understand that we have to be good stewards of the land. Another generation understanding that their food supply is critical, that they know where it comes from, what it takes to be able to have the healthy foods that so often are taken for granted. And you know, I'm really encouraged because we have had some difficult situations in the Skagit. Again, like I said earlier, it's really the point of the spear of much of the dialogue, sometimes conflict around land use and water use and all of those issues. One of the things that's been an encouragement to me is that I believe the agricultural community in Skagit have led some of the most really best thinking in terms of what those next steps need to look like. We need to work with them. We need to empower them. We need to make sure that when they are running into really obstacles with agencies, that we get the agencies in the room with our agricultural community and be a part of the solution, rather than our farmers feeling like they have no advocates. We can be those advocates. I am willing to set up those meetings. I will tell you, I think it's important that we have a new director of agriculture who is very, very engaged in the challenges that we are seeing and that he is seeing in the Skagit agricultural community, as well as in Whatcom, has made a personal commitment to me to be more involved, more hands-on, is putting a special assistant, especially for Western Washington agriculture, on his team. I've worked with that person, Patrick Capper. I believe that he will do a good job for the director, but the director intends to be there as well. I think we all recognize this is going to be a team effort, and I want our community in the Skagit to know that we will be passionate advocates on their behalf.
I'm Senator Barbara Bailey from the 10th Legislative District. The 10th District actually encompasses all of Island County, part of Skagit and Snohomish. And I live on Whidbey Island, on the north end of Whidbey Island. But I always tell people, and when I introduce myself, that I have the prettiest district in the whole state because we have Deception Pass, and we have Skagit where the tulips grow. So most people never argue with me when I say that. Not only the ability to grow the food and other things that we produce in agriculture, we also want the health and well-being of our animals, our dairy cows, you know, anything that's being on the land. But then how the water is when it reaches the sound is also impacting things like our fish, our shellfish industry. So it's science all the way from the headwaters of the water all the way to when it reaches the sound. Those are some of the really big issues on the west side.
Great. I'm Representative Dave Hayes. I live out on Camano Island, just down the road from y'all. So I don't necessarily know that farming in Washington is in trouble. I think that just like every other aspect of government, we always have to keep an eye on these proposals as they come through, and make sure that that we as constituents are talking to our legislators and letting all of us down here in Olympia know the impact of these proposals. That's very critical. I think that farmland conversion is a big threat. We always have to pay attention to that. We always have to pay attention to the regulatory scheme and the over-regulation that we have. So your attention to these matters as a farmer are critical, and staying in communication with us is very important.
One of the most heavily regulated industries in our state is our ag industry. First of all, we want there to be no harm to the environment because of the way we grow our crops, or we maintain our fruit industry, or other agricultural industries. We want to make sure that we protect the land, and we want to make sure we protect the environment. I think the best stewards of each of those, quite frankly, is our ag industry, because they know without that protection, then they're not going to be able to grow the crops or the fruit and the other things that are happening in an agricultural environment. So they're very, very, I think, willing to do whatever needs to be done that makes sense, and science is behind it in order for them to protect the agricultural industry. There are some things that we learn as time goes on, the science grows, and certainly we want to make sure that we're protecting both the industry as well as the environment, and the environment meaning the land that we cherish.
Yeah.
We constantly find, not only in the Skagit, but again, tip of the spear situations in which zealous regulators, believing they are doing the right thing, create chaos. And again, folks who want to try to do the right thing here in Olympia, passing laws, not understanding the unintended consequences. You know, one of the fundamental things that people always need to remember about a piece of legislation that they want is that it may be 2 pages today, it may be 200 pages today. Once it is signed into law, it is going to be handed to an agency under the executive branch. And you can be guaranteed that that legislation, by rulemaking, often is doubled and tripled in size. Never forget that. So always be careful about what we ask for. But on so much of the burdensome and confusing and complicated regulatory schemes that have been created over multiple, really several generations of law here in Olympia, has created nightmares for our small businesses, for our farmers, for those who are trying to employ people, make a living, steward the land, and at the end of the day, an agency, they have lawyers paid for by taxpayers. A farmer, when he is having to sort out regulations and rules, and he is being challenged on something that he thinks he's doing the right thing, but suddenly the newest, youngest person on that in that agency comes and changes the rules from the previous inspector, for example, happens all the time. What happens that fundamentally agencies don't understand, this farmer is no longer taking care of his cows, the dairyman taking care of his cows, the farmer taking care of his land. They're not working on their barns, they're not working on their equipment. What are they doing? They're trying to thread this needle of regulation. The agency, their enforcement mechanisms are paid for by the taxpayer. The farmer, the dairyman, the rancher, they're taking time away from their businesses, from stewardship, from getting their crops to market in a timely way, from their irrigation, whatever it is, and trying to sort out what's being asked of them. So when I began 8 years ago, we could not even move a regulatory reform bill. It's kind of one of those things that make people's eyes glaze over. They don't understand it. They thought it was about lowering public health standards or lowering water quality standards. And it took a couple of years to build the momentum to help, to be perfectly frank, my colleagues here to understand that's not what this is about. This is about streamlining. This is about certainty. This is about telling you as a dairyman, or you as a farmer, or you as a rancher, or you as a business person, what is expected of you, having the agencies to align what's expected of you, and then to create some certainty about a timeline around it. Fortunately, we had a breakthrough about 3 years ago, 3.5 years ago. We've moved a number of bills that we're just going to be seeing that data come back. We've got a long way to go, to be perfectly frank. This is going to continue to be an uphill battle, but we've made significant progress. I would ask anyone that's interested to contact my office. We can give them details about some of the bills that we were able to pass in the last 3 years that will create greater certainty, but it's not going to be overnight. And we still have to work on this issue. We still have to have people understand what's at stake if we tie up our agricultural community, those who are responsible for our food supplies, unnecessarily in rules and regulation in which they can't have certainty. A great example, it's what's happening on the irrigation ditches right now. And in that situation, it's more of a federal issue. We're trying to reach out, we're trying to have influence where we can, but to not be able to do your job in order to move water off the land when needed and to move it on the land when needed because of confusion, because of not getting clarity around what's expected of you, and to be perfectly frank, what is their authorization to ask that of you? Was it the intent of the law? Or do we again have someone on the ground, perhaps even someone new, interpreting it the way that they see fit based on their recent degree from one of our institutions, without really a true understanding of the good stewardship that's happened for generations in the Skagit, why we have every endangered species of salmon in the Skagit River. Often there's just that disconnect. We have to keep helping the agencies understand, working to connect the federal agencies with the state agencies, with the local agencies, and then again, if there is a conflict, bringing us to the table, and happy to be there so that they can explain to me why behind their computer, sending emails, they're willing to put a farmer's next crop at risk. I want to know that. I want them to have to face the person whose life they may be imperiling in terms of their livelihood and their work. And so we want to do more of that, not less. Until we solve these problems, I want to reach a day in the Skagit where we don't have these kind of conflicts, where people recognize the good work that's being done and we've found those common ground solutions.
I think that, you know, it's always a balance. If we overregulate in a way that will take agriculture out of production, then we've not done the right thing. So it's a fine balance here at the legislature to not only protect our natural resources, but also protect the industry that grows a lot of the food that we rely on in order to be independent of other countries in producing our food. We really want to make sure that we're still producing food for our country and not become dependent on others for that.